All right. Good morning, everybody. TG here. It is November 4th when I'm recording this, and we're live. Hopefully, everybody is surviving this morning. We had another little bit of a gap down, so a little surprised. I'll be honest. I didn't quite see the gap down coming. People haven't really seen anything specifically about news, but yesterday we did see that underneath the surface there were a lot of stocks that were moving down, especially crypto, and we saw that, and kind of the whole thing that I was talking about yesterday when we were on the mic was like, wow, okay, I was expecting a little bit more strength of the market, and instead we're actually getting some weakness. And then I guess that is now catching up to and working its way up into the indices. So we got that. The other thing that I can talk about is that I was trying to figure out how the market was going to work off its overbought condition. And so if we come over here and clean this up a little bit, we had the market go just absolutely straight up for 4 days last week, and we know about that situation. Straight up for 4 days, and it's like, okay, let's have this thing come back down a little bit, and we shorted the market. Basically, we put a call credit spread on, and just waiting for the thing to come down. And underneath the surface, we were looking at individual stocks. We were prepared for having them come down too, and right around here, it started to look like it was getting some support as price came into the hourly 50. However, because if you look at the SPX, you're like, okay, this is looking pretty decent, looking pretty decent. But then I was looking at, say, NVIDIA or SMH or the FANG stocks or, FNGU or the NASDAQ. And I'm like, this still seems a little extended, because if you look at here on the NASDAQ, you can see that, as of yesterday, price was still pretty much floating in midair up on the daily chart. So pretty much still up here. And I was like, okay, the SPX is kind of down to what could be considered support, but the NASDAQ is still very elevated. Same with the SMH, things like that. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not really prepared, or I'm not thinking that the market is going to go higher right from here, but maybe we need to keep digesting, kind of go sideways, chop around a little bit. And that's basically where I left off with anybody else yesterday. And then today we opened the gap down. I'm like, okay, guess that's what's going to be happening. And so far, that is at least bringing price back down into underneath the daily 8 and kind of back into at least this zone. So we are, the market is working on trying to figure out or establish where it wants to find some support. And that's kind of what we're looking at today. Now, I am encouraged that initially this was bought up, but that could also just be a factor of we opened with a pretty big gap down. And so that just led a big gap, a big void, basically, to have price kind of just crawl its way back up into overhead resistance. And so that's kind of another thing that we're seeing in through here. So if we kind of look at the lower time frames right here and here, and honestly, the market got bought up so fast this morning, I didn't even have time to click off a trade. But I was looking at it, I wanted to see how far down this thing went before it turned around, because I figured it was going to bounce. But man, this thing just zipped right up there very, very quickly. And I just couldn't put anything on. And then I was trying to think, okay, well, we're going to, is this thing just going to squeeze up all day? Are we going to fill the gap? And I'm like, I didn't think that was going to happen. And so we did run into the 2-minute 50 and the 5-minute 21. And so that for now is the resistance. But now we have to figure out, okay, is this going to hold? And so now I'm kind of wondering, are we going to get this double bottom, basically, in this area, retesting the low area, and are we going to work our way up a little bit? Now I take that and I look at the internals and I'm like, I don't know if I want to take a long trade here because the internals aren't really giving me anything. And so just kind of been sitting on my hands this morning, looking around, and I'm trying to decide if there's anything to take advantage of. And, maybe today's going to be a sideways day from this point now, because the internals are not really supportive of anything to the upside. I think we kind of got our bounce, or at least our closing of the gap situation, the reversion to the mean. And then we got to be careful that today could just kind of could be a sideways day because, it's a little bit oversold on the hourly chart, still kind of this gap in through here, but we did come down to the daily 21. So I think that's going to be looking at. Yeah, Rick, that's what I was saying is day trading for the SPX, seeing if there was a long for the day. Because if we're looking at the lower time frame here, you can see that we bounced, ran into resistance, and now we're retesting the low area. And that's why I wanted to see if we're going to continue going higher for the day for the SPX as far as a day trade. I can also look a little bit at the RSP, which is the equal weight of the SPX. And the thing I noticed here, and this has kind of been the interesting thing, and that I've been talking to the Moxie traders too for basically a week and a half now, is that the rest of the market has been pulling back before the SPX, which is why I said, hey, the SPX is too high. It needs to keep coming down. And we could see that here with the market. The RSP has just been down, 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 down each day. The only thing I can now point to, and we'll have to see if this carries on into the future, is number one, we have an overall double bottom. And number two, we have a local double bottom. And so I'm kind of curious to see, is this going to hold? Or are we going to start seeing these things repair? And is this the low? And does the market use this gap down that we had this morning as a potential starting point? And so, yeah, I'm just kind of looking at this. And for as much as the market's down, the rest of the market has already done its pullback. That's the thing we've been discussing, is that underneath the surface, a lot of stocks started to pull back ahead of the market, which means that if the market, the SPX, can kind of get down to an area, the rest of the market might already be at their lows and starting to hammer out a low and start to move back up. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Donald says my mic is in and out on YouTube live stream. Thanks. Mirza, any chance you can hop over to the YouTube for the live stream and see how my audio is doing? Honestly, I don't know what to tell you, because I just turn all the tools on and let it go. But yeah, it looks like it's picking up and the right things for me. So yeah, if it's not great, I don't know what to tell you. So sorry about that. Let's see. Rick came in at SPX 11,4,680 based on the horrid internals you saw yesterday. Yeah, we were kind of seeing that too, as far as just how yesterday behaved. But let's see, 60. So anyway, let me kind of finish here. We have the RSP doing a potential double bottom. And I kind of feel like the market, and I've been saying this now for the third day, where I thought that the market was kind of stretched to the downside. And now this is the third day that I've been saying that. And now, yesterday we had trying to split this up into two different things I'm saying. Yesterday, the SPX kind of was neutral, down a little bit, recovered. Yesterday, the IWM, the RSP, the rest of the market, gap down hard and recovered. And again, today we see a bit of a gap down in the RSP with a little bit of a recovery. And really, it didn't go much lower than it did yesterday. However, the SPX did go lower, even though it's recovered. And so we are seeing kind of a bifurcation of this market underneath the surface of, maybe the FANG stocks or the mega caps or something like that versus the rest of the market. And so that's kind of what I'm seeing. Okay, cool. Yeah, guys, it looks like everyone else is doing fine on YouTube as far as everything else. Okay, yeah, thanks, Mirza. Yeah, looks like audio is good. And Dennis, yeah, RSP did not make a lower low today. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That I feel like this is kind of notable. Underneath the surface, the rest of the market, the equal weight, actually made a higher low today. And I think that for the last week and a half, the rest of the market has been pulling back, waiting for the SPX to kind of burn off its overbought condition. So this is why I keep looking at some things and like, okay, I feel like we should be getting kind of close to a low here, and then we can see if this market starts to get back up and going. The other situation, I was talking to a trader friend of mine this morning, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess the market's down today. That's where we're going to go. And, everyone's kind of looking for this year-end rally. And Tom Lee is talking about, I think he was saying, did he say 73 or 7,400, maybe even 7,500? I mean, those are pretty big up there. But at least if we're looking at, say, let's just say 7,200, if this market's going to get to 7,200 by the end of the year, it's healthier, better to get to 7,200 from, say, a 6,800 start instead of a 6,950 start. It's kind of like, let's back this thing up a little bit so we can get a little bit more distance out of it. And that's why I think overall, pulling back like this is going to be fine as long as this doesn't continue to get worse and roll over and collapse. This should be considered a pretty normal, healthy pullback for now. So that's what I'm going to be looking at. And now we just kind of need to wait it out and wait for these things to start turning around. Now, not everything is terrible out there. I did see a lot of things get kind of bought up today. So let's go around and take some assessments out there. Looking at the IWM, this is another little sector area that we keep talking about. Yesterday I was like, hey, price just tapped the daily 50. Cool. Okay. Doesn't seem to matter exactly today. We're down a little bit more. We do have this down. It is making lower lows. But once again, if I kind of look at how price has been down, it looks like it's just kind of been chugging lower. And as this continues, just kind of get hammered a little bit lower, I think at some point a low will be formed and then we'll start to get priced back up. The other thing that I'm going to note is that this is still not technically in a downtrend. The price has not rejected or been rejected by the hourly 50 yet. You can see on the 15-minute time frame, it's been following the 15-minute 50 down, but not the hourly. And so this really could just be considered, sideways chop, with a little sprinkling of downside. And then if we look at something like the MDY, this is the mid caps. And if we actually zoom out, you can kind of see the same thing here. It's mostly just sideways. Now, I know we're getting a Moxie price trigger right now. That can change because that Moxie indicator is still active. So, a couple down days. And we'll have to see. But right now, this kind of looks like it's just a bull flagging into the weekly 21 at a previous resistance area. So I don't see anything too terrible yet in through this area. And again, you can see that price has been down and just kind of gets pushed down. But if you compare what we see today or even yesterday to what the SPX is doing, it kind of paints a different story. And that's again why I say that over the last week and a half, things like this have already been moving down, and now it's finally just working its way up the food chain to the SPX. And then we can look at things like ARKK. And this one we've been saying, yeah, mostly just going sideways, sideways. In the Moxie room, we did talk about this and said, it's just not quite ready yet. Look at the Moxie indicator. It just isn't ready yet. And so that's why I was like, well, we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. Didn't know today was going to be a gap down, but just also wasn't quite ready yet. And so that's kind of what we're waiting for. Let's see. So Ralph, would I think the return on the equal weight would be the place to place your bets or stick with the SPY? I don't trade the RSP. Of course, I would trade the SPX, trade the NASDAQ. I use the RSP, the equal weight, to help differentiate between the equal weight and the cap weight. It helps me identify what's moving the market. So, because if the SPX was up like it was last week, you actually look underneath the surface, you're like, what gives? Like not a lot of names are moving. This is why in my weekend video, I said, if the market was confusing, watch this video, because a lot of us, you're probably looking at the market like, okay, wow, the market's up, but none my stocks aren't, or my account isn't up. Like what gives? And that is the difference that we've been seeing between the SPX and the RSP. It was basically Nvidia and some of the other Apple, Amazon, those earnings, those things were moving up, but underneath the surface, a majority of names were actually moving down. And we could see the same thing here if you use here's breadth. And you can see right here that breadth got hammered last week. And even though the market was up. So now I'm just kind of watching this, I keep hitting refresh and, it hasn't really gotten worse, but it's still down. So we're going to have to wait and see if this thing can finally turn around and whatever, breadth has been coming down. And that's why we've been seeing the market come down. And I'd like to see if we can actually get these things to turn back up and get some more participation. But right now the market's just still kind of idling down here. And I think, as I said, part of this is that a lot of things are just still very, very extended. I mean, if we look at Nvidia, the market, I don't know if the market really wants to go if Nvidia is still considered extended. So, like this, still very extended. And so today's move is actually just bringing price closer to the hourly 50. Is that enough? We don't know yet. We don't know how long this is going to take. But I think that just shows that it's still extended. Or we can look at something like NBTS actually get hammered. Was that earnings today? Let's see. Yes. Yeah, it was earnings yesterday after the close. I don't have a position in this. Mostly what I've been telling everybody is, of course, anything can happen on earnings, but this was very extended. And we're kind of not really in the mode, the market's not in the mode to just keep ripping these things up right now. Now, Irene, Cypher, a couple other names like that are still actually pretty strong today. But you can see that the market's just needing to kind of tamp down some of this craziness. And if we're going to go up towards the end of the year, market says like, okay, guys, we gotta tamp this stuff down before we can really get going again. And I think that's what we're seeing here with NBTS. This was just a really really big move, and so far it's kind of just been working its way back to potential support. Gosh, I yeah, TEM is another one. I hope they don't. I have a position on this. I have a few positions actually. They are longer term, so even if this does go down on earnings, I can ride it out and withstand it. Yeah, it won't be fun if it gaps down. I'm hoping for neutral. I'm hoping it actually doesn't do much. I think that would be great. And you can see that for the most part, it's been hanging out. It's had a couple dips, but all those dips seem to be getting bought back up. So for now, I'm kind of viewing this as good. Of course, anything can happen on earnings, and that's what we're just going to have to do is just deal with it. And so that's kind of my situation on TEM. Same with Grab. Grab had earnings today. I was kind of hopeful that it was going to go up. We saw a lot of call action showing up on Grab yesterday. I think a lot of people probably got disappointed, but this could also be a little bit part of the market just saying nope, 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 not quite yet, not ready yet. And so it came down. I was really looking forward to Grab holding the daily 50 and holding the hourly 50, but earnings, anything happens on earnings. I'm not too worried about this. Again, I have longer term positions on this, so if anything, maybe this is a buying opportunity. It's a little too early for me to determine that, and you can see here we could just say it had a double bottom. So I'm going to chalk this up to basically I think Grab is still bull flagging, and we're still seeing a lot of things like that. Even uh, NBIS, I think we could chalk this up to bull flagging for now. We don't know for sure yet, but that looks like a bull flag. A lot of these things that are seriously overbought are kind of just chilling out and having to take their time, and they're either going sideways or they're pulling back to support. And Palantir was another one. Of course, Palantir is making a lot of news. A lot of people are either poo-pooing this or being like, this is ridiculous. And I heard Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir, was coming out and he was really railing on the short sellers. And it's kind of funny whenever you see a CEO or a founder kind of rail on the short sellers, be like, that's why my stock is going down is because of the short sellers. It's like, yeah, there might be some of that, but come on. That's not everything. And we need short sellers. It keeps the market healthy. It's a balance. And just because your stock is going down, I guess he's got to point fingers someplace. So that's just kind of typical stuff. Going into this, we do have a longer position. I have a January call on this. We're still good. We did close it. I think it was about, or we didn't close it. The market closed yesterday, and it was about plus 85%. I haven't looked at it yet. I imagine we got a pretty good dent taken out of it. We could look at this and say, yeah, it was kind of up at this upper channel trend line that I have, but I wanted to kind of see if there was any benefit from earnings to get us a little bit of a pop. The fact that it's back down, it's really just back down in range. It's at the lower end of this channel. It's right at the daily 21. It's really kind of right at previous price. And so while I'm giving some of my gains back, I'm still looking at the longer term picture. And so it's just like, okay, instead of really exploding or going up even further today, well, I'm going to have to wait a few weeks, and I'm okay with that. So unless this thing really rolls over and gets worse, I'm okay with this, and that's what a longer term position with this is. Kraut, yeah, you got lucky selling Palantir. That's cool. And then Kraut, same thing with Grab. I think Grab is just kind of chopping sideways and just hanging out. So not too much. Okay, Jasper, nice. Yeah, you had a bearish trade on SPX. Good job making some money with it. And yeah, let me Yeah, brighter side, you're kind of thinking that the market might do a little bit of a quick correction before the run. Yeah, and that's the question. Like, are we in that right now? How long is it going to last? How much further is it going to go down? Those are the things that we kind of need to look at and to figure out and go kind of go along for the ride. Let's see. I think I'm making sure I'm answering all the questions out there. Um, yeah, and then so Rick, as far as Ethereum, yeah, Ethereum, BMNR, yeah, they're getting smashed. This is not great stuff, but we understand that when the market comes down like this, these are risk on areas, and when you have risk areas, they're going to be the first ones to go. And I've been waiting for this pullback to find some support, and clearly it's not finding any support right now. And that's where whenever these things do start to firm up and actually start to move, then that is when we will be able to figure out if this market has bottomed, because these things are going to be kind of the, uh, the I don't know, canaries in the coal mine situation, or they're going to be the first ones to kind of wake up and get going. And so, yeah, we're going to be watching these and being pretty sensitive with them. Now, if we zoom out and we look here, I originally was looking for Ethereum to hold the weekly 21. I kind of thought this market was going to be a little bit stronger at this period of time than it is right now. And the fact that it's coming down, it's like, okay, I'm going to just have to kind of keep backing up my expectations in through here. I do think we're still in a bull market. I still think Ethereum is going to be bullish. It is just having to work off its overbought condition a lot further than I was thinking. And maybe we can kind of look at here on the monthly chart. Price kind of still far away from the monthly 10, and so far this is coming back down. We can also look at the weekly 30, and you can see that before it's kind of held that, and so just kind of got to sit back and wait and figure out where this thing wants to stop going down at. Well, Rick, I wouldn't say it's bearish. Okay, this is something that I've had to kind of talk with my dad about too, because he would look at something like this. He's like, "It's bearish. It's in a downtrend." I say, "Well, it depends on what time frame you're looking at, because is Ethereum bearish if you look at it right here? No. In fact, it's over pretty much all the moving averages. Or, you got the weekly 8 over the weekly 21. This thing is in an uptrend. So it's not bearish. It is doing a pullback. And, if you look at, say, the 15-minute or the hourly, maybe you could say it's bearish on those time frames because it's in a downtrend on those time frames. But those are pullbacks within the greater context of an overall uptrending chart. That's what I would say. Because even through here, yeah, you look at this, okay, fine, bearish for this time frame. But these are pullbacks in an overall uptrending chart. If we come over here and we look like this, would you have said right here, would you have said this is bearish? I'm not sure I would. I'd be saying that's a pullback. Of course, it feels bearish in the moment. And if you look at the hourly and 15-minute time frame at that time, yeah, it feels bearish and it's in a downtrend. But you have to understand, you're still in an overall uptrend. And this was just a pullback. Now we zoom to where we are now, and you kind of look at this and you're like, well, gee, that is really a pullback. That's a bigger one. And yes, now it's pulling back more on the daily chart, but it's still essentially this for now. It's still pulling back. And that's because when I zoom out and I look at something like the weekly chart, this is still in an uptrend. We still have the 8 over the 21. We still have the 30 in an uptrend. We still have the 50 in an uptrend. We still have price over the monthly 10. And so this is kind of, I don't know if it's semantics or something then, but that's where I say, okay, is it bearish? No. Does it have bearish areas in it? Sure, you could say that. Yeah, Ralph, I heard the Michael Burry was short Palantir. I also know a lot of people are debating and all that kind of stuff about Palantir and how high it can be and should be and stuff like that. And I don't know. Those are opinions, and I could be wrong too as far as thinking it's going to go higher. But for right now, I mean, the trend is up, and I think I want to stick with that. Because you could look at things like Hood. How high are these things going to go? You don't know. Or you look at Irene. And how high are they going to go? I don't know. So that's why when you look at Palantir, it's still pretty high. I mean, it could go higher, and that's why I'm like, well, let's see. And it's not in a downtrend yet. It's just, if anything, I think it didn't want to go up, and the market didn't want to go up, and so we're going to have to digest this a little bit. Yeah, Tommy Boy. Yeah, okay. You're talking about Michael Burry also. Yeah, yeah. All right. Let's see. Okay. I think that pretty much for the social media session, I think we're going to kind of wrap it up there. Just remember, I think I've got, let's see, where is this? Yeah. So there you go, guys. Out there on the social media, we actually got quite a few people chatting today. So good to see you out there. We got YouTube and X. Let's see. I think we had one other person. No, I guess just YouTube and X. But yeah, if you guys want to come on over, we've had a pretty good time in the Moxie room right now. We're having to kind of sit on our hands for a few things. I'm going to jump on over to the Moxie room. We're going to go through our positions, kind of take a damage assessment since the market gap down. We'll see what we can do and see if we can kind of, make some light through this forest and see when this might kind of wrap up to the downside. But other than that, those of you on the social media, remember simplertrading.com/Moxie is where you guys can find more information about me. For the Moxie people